Ask the GMs, episode 19, how to run your first game and start role-playing. Good evening, this is Zach from Ask the GMs. Welcome you back, and I hope you're having a great evening. Handing it off to Pat.
It's Pat. We're back again. It's been a little bit of time, but hopefully we'll get back on a normal schedule. And, I like to think of this as GMing your first session for dummies. Buy some dummies. That'd be us. No, they're smarter than I. But speaking of smarts, let's go on to Brian.
Hey everybody, Brian, and I'm still an aspiring GM, so I'm excited to go through this myself. It'll be a good learning experience for everybody. But I will pass it to Lindsay.
Lindsay, and I am a player and lover of all things TTRPG, so I'm really excited to go over some stuff tonight and to learn from all these wonderful people, including, I guess I'll pass it back over to Zach.
Thank you, and the goal of this episode is to get everyone ready for Free RPG Day. If you don't know, Free RPG Day is coming up. It's June 24th. Check out your local friendly game store for any free modules and people running games. I'm going to try to run Dockside Dogs at Cape Fear Games.
Speaking of Cape Fear Games, we would like to shout them out as well as Sideboard. We spend plenty of time there. Great folks willing to help, and we love it. Cheers to them.
Thank you, Brian. To start off this episode, we're going to do the very basics in terms of teaching people how to get ready to play their first RPG. And it's literally playing your first game. I'm going to start by your first goal, if you've never played and you're not comfortable running, is finding a group to play with. Whether that's going to a local hobby shop, if you're in college looking at message boards, go to your local library and look for message boards, look online, look on Facebook. The worst thing you do is just find a group and you go there and play and you find out you don't like it. Congrats, you're out an evening and you don't like this hobby, versus never knowing if you like it or not.
Yep, and I'd say, if you're interested in GMing sessions and you're not sure which system you want to try, in lieu of, actually hitting the ground, and say you're not able to find a lot of people doing RPG systems that you would like to play in your area, or you don't have them around, you could always see what people are doing on YouTube or other video source sharing sites. So say if you want to see what D&D, you could go watch Critical Role or any number of other things to see how they run their games, so you can get some insight in how to run your games.
If you're looking to play and none of those options are really available to you, maybe you don't have a gaming store or really a community that you know of to get exposure that way. Ask around with your friends or coworkers, or maybe someone has played before and would like to play again, and you can come together or learn together. That's the first time when I started playing initially, it was just a bunch of work friends, and I just asked and they said, yeah, I've always wanted to do that. And so we just kind of taught ourselves how to play with, online resources or whatever we could get our hands on to figure it out. Watching some videos online, like you said, helped. There's a lot of resources online. But yeah, just put it out there. You never know who in your friend group wants to play.
I agree, Lindsay. Putting it out there is a good strategy. I know I had not played. I've only been playing for about a year, and I probably would not have played if not for Zach inviting me. And a little known fact, I don't know if I've shared this with y'all, but I was in the parking lot of Cape Fear, ready to go in and being super nervous and having anxiety and rolling a D20 to decide if I was going to go in. And the universe told me I had to go in. So that's what I did. And I'm very grateful to have my, have the community, because it's pretty cool. And I'm thankful for Zach and, of course, Lindsay for being there in my initial cherry popping event and being gentle.
That
Brian,
was the best way to word that.
Brian, can I adopt you?
I mean, does that make me a dependent?
For tax purposes, no.
Damn.
I
Well,
don't know. Following Brian's cherry popping event, it's giving me creepy uncle vibes there, Zach. But I think a synopsis of basically what we're all trying to say is you got to take that leap. Be it you're the person that initiates, with your whole party of friends to be the first one to rip that band-aid off and do it and start a thing that you guys may grow to like, or Brian rolling that dice in the parking lot and just getting in there. So don't be fearful of it, and if it's not for you, then you don't have to keep doing it.
Yeah, that's the best advice. Like, oh, I'm not into this. Well, congratulations, you spent an evening finding out. Like, you don't have to spend lots of money to do that. The other secret tech I want to offer, and it's one I need to keep in mind for myself, is like before you start a session, whether it's your first time or you're running a game, always start with the mantra, I am going to have fun. Like, don't set a level of fun, just like, I am going to have fun. And regardless of what happens, you're going to have a good time.
Agreed. My general life view is be open to openness, and that's the best thing you can do is go in with the mindset of this is going to be fun, something new is going to happen, and I'm going to enjoy it. That's what I try to do every session.
Now, as far as your capability of like playing, like whether you should play these RPGs physically or on a digital thing. I think I speak for most of us here that we prefer playing physical in person because when somebody's sitting across from you, you can just see the reactions on their face, or you could animate with your hands better, convey better what it is that you're trying to role play or do with your characters versus digitally. Now, nothing's wrong digital. There's a bunch of different services you can use. Roll20 is the first thing that comes to my mind, but I'm sure there's a bunch of other digital platforms out there. And
Foundry would be a good one.
Yeah. And some people, they might live in bumfuck Egypt and, it's an hour or something to your nearest local game store to play. So some of us don't even have options, but just kind of look around for what's best for you in your life.
I mean, there's so many online options now that you can play. And I mean, even we played one, campaign we played strictly on Discord, and we weren't even using voice chat. We were just typing. And I felt like I felt like I got a great experience out of that as well, even though we were typing. So whatever you can get to work for you. There's a lot of options.
All good points. And if you're showing up to your first time playing with a group or your first time playing with a system, some of the best things you can do is show up with a pencil, show up with RPG dice if you have them. You don't have to have them. I guarantee someone in the group will. And
People will have them.
Show up with a can-do attitude. I'm recently switched positions. I got a new job, and my whole mantra is like, I'm just going to be a Voss. I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to absorb all the information. And that's what you need to do. You need to be just very passive, because don't go there with any like massive expectations.
Yeah, because I know some people, they haven't even played, and they've watched a lot of stuff online, and they're like, oh, I just want to be that bard that sleeps with everybody. And like, that's where they're pigeonholing themselves into, and it's like, it might not all pan out how you want, and really depends on the group that you're running with. So I don't know, just like Zach said, be open to different things.
I can verify that my first session, I think we played D&D. I had no idea what kind of a character I wanted to be. Fortunately, somebody there was, and Zach definitely helped. He's like, be a barbarian. They're super easy. All you do is rage. So that was great guidance to start with, because little did I know at that point in time how kind of crazy it gets later on at higher levels, but yeah, it's been such a learning experience and so much fun.
It's when you're there, I mean, don't be afraid to ask a question like that. Like, I don't know, just say, I'm not sure what to play. And someone like Zach will step up and go, oh, well, normally the question is, normally they'll take into consideration what's something that's easier to do, but what do you want to do? Do you want to hit things? Or do you want magic? Or, so that's something that if it's your first time showing up and you're not exactly sure, to just don't be afraid to admit it and to ask someone, because they'll be happy to help you. Because the thing about this is that people who play this, they're all about characters. They want to, that's part of the fun, is creating a character and helping others do that.
Yeah. Never be afraid to ask questions, even if you seem like it's dumb. Oh, I'm gonna be like, it's gonna be really awkward if I ask that. No, just ask it.
Because we're there because we love it. Like we're there. You'll get some help.
Also, like, oh, it's my first time. I don't know what to do. Just watch the other players. And if you observe, like, maybe I shouldn't do that because that doesn't seem like something that's fun for me. Congratulations, you observed that and don't want to do that. You learned.
All right. So our next road stop on the road to becoming a GM. We've talked about, what to do as a player, go in, learn a new system potentially, find out how to play said game, be it digitally or physically. The next step would be gathering your people and doing all the logistical bullcrap that kind of sucks, but is needed.
Hardest part, unfortunately.
Yeah. Zach, would you like to talk about some stuff that you do on the logistics end, as far as, GMing, getting people together, communicating?
Yeah, so this is not a fun part of running a game, but it is necessary. You cannot lollygag, you can't put this off. This is mandatory. We are going to set a date as a group, and that might not be the best day for you personally as a human. But if that is the best day for 5 people and you're the 6th person, that is the day you pick. And you ask, is everyone okay with this consistent date and time, or do we need to change it versus holidays, birthdays, life in general? You need to feel everyone out. Another good thing, I personally tend to like to do, because it kind of sets the tone for everyone, is either set a theme for characters or build an initial concept and hand them to the players and let them grow those characters out. That way everyone has a set theme to work off of. Like, you're literally like, I'm Charles Xavier and I'm building the X-Men. Here's the initial concept, and let your players take the sketch and draw it into a full character.
And I'd say on the whole logistics of, talking to your party, getting your dates scheduled, communication's key. Usually it's on you as a game master to kind of check in with everybody, make sure everybody's good to go, drop gentle reminders. You could use Facebook groups or Discord channels or exchange phone numbers, or use messenger pigeons if you guys live back in time. But communication's key. And just, try not to if 3 days before the session that, hey, something came up, go ahead and let people know, because the earlier they know, the better. Versus making plans the day of and, all my plans went to shit.
I do have to say, that does seem like one of the greater challenges of GMing is herding cats, if you will, because not every humans have different schedules, and things come up. So it's life. It completely rational. Now, if you have somebody who is consistently day of, I'm not going to make it, well, you're kind of wasting other people's time, especially the GMs. So be a good human.
Now, I think Zach and I would definitely agree it is the hardest part of GMing. But when we went back to physical or digital, something I do find as far as the digital end of things is if you do play digitally, for whatever reason, it seems that is easier to get people there because for me, Lindsay was talking about our textual RPG adventure, and I could do it on my phone. And, whether I was waiting in a train station or an airport or sitting at dinner, I could, chime in every once in a while. So I think that is a perk of digital play.
I think one of the biggest tricks to use if you're going to start running a game is be excited. Like, sell your excitement to your players, because people want to play the exciting, interesting thing. Don't be like, well, we're gonna do curses, blah, 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 blah. Like, don't be monotone. Like, sell the excitement, because people want to do the cool thing.
And I would back that up with I believe I've said it before on our podcast, is you get out of it what you put into it. So if you are monotone and just blasé about all of it, likely your players aren't going to be hyped for it either.
I mean, to me, it seems like as a GM, you do get a little bit of a say in who joins your game. Obviously, if you're kind of strapped for people, or you have a friend group, you might not be. But I think that would be one of the main things that I would take into account starting a game, would be who is playing, because I don't want a bunch of Gregs in my group.
Yeah, and talking further about Brian saying who's playing, since you're thinking of starting this whole game, I would start maybe with 3 people, and 3, 4, 5 even. But if you're just starting GMing, the more people you add, the more effort and the more directions you're going to be pulled, so increasing the difficulty. And definitely, even for myself or Zach's more experienced than I am, but I'd say, once it gets to 6 or 7, hell, my hard cutoff is 5 or 6. What about you, Zach? How many are you comfortable with running?
6 is my cutoff.
I ran a one-shot not long ago. It was the first time I'd ever really done it officially. And it was for a birthday party. And it was 7 people. And I regretted my decision. It was a lot of people.
The biggest reason being is that the GM can only give attention to so much, because, the GM's going to be the focal point of, the interactions. Yes, some players can do mini chats beside themselves, but you're going to have to interact with the GM to drive the story forward. So,
and the running trick over 5 is do the bouncing ball approach. Just literally go around the table like a circle, like you. Or we're in a group. Okay, well, you two sit together and we'll resolve this as we bounce the ball around.
Yeah, because I found that was pretty nice whenever I was running Two-Headed Serpent. You and Ian and Lindsay and I think Brian were out fighting those soldiers. No. Brian was in the forest doing the arms deal with the monkey.
That is correct.
And Rob and Brian were in the forest, so okay, we did a whole lot of fighting over here. Let's cut to this arms deal. 1, to give me a break as the GM, but 2, to get Brian and Rob back into it, and then cut back. But it kind of almost made kind of a cinematic feel in my mind, because you think of a movie and it's like, oh, war's breaking out over here, and then we cut to this comedy scene, and then back to the war and back to the comedy scene. It was like super nice.
And as a player, I appreciate it, because I mean, as much as I enjoy being the center player for a moment, I also really just enjoy how the story progresses with other people. And that's a personal preference. I don't know if everybody else feels that way, but if my character's kind of doing quote unquote mundane things, or something that's not really that exciting, I am pumped, when Zach when it cuts to Zach and Lindsay, and Zach just murked somebody in cold blood for $50,000. That was great.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's an important part. At least I mean, I feel like I feel the same way. And I think it's important for, I mean, just from an RP standpoint, if you're role playing, it's good to look. I have ADHD. I know sometimes it's hard to stay centered, but it's about listening, and you'll never know, like, if you're, it's fun. It's fun to see, even if you're not the center of attention. It's really fun to watch other people have an adventure, but also you're getting all of this information from them about who their characters are, and they're in certain situations, and that's something you go, oh, you clock something. Your character may be there, they may not be the center of attention, but they're there, and you can clock it and go, okay, well, I'm going to bring that up later because that's interesting as fuck. Like, I feel like that's an important part of it, is to try to stay in it. But
Yep. Be in the world, even if you're not the star player. Be like, ooh, I need to check out that painting later because the game master mentioned 2 things about it in passing.
All right. Good. We've talked about finding what system you like. We talked about learning the system. We talked about the logistics of how to get your group together.
Well, Pat, not to interrupt you, we need to cover a very specific topic right now.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, not to be rude. Now, I am an older player and an older game master, so I'm going to get my old rickety card out because it's not a topic that I'm normally used to seeing, and I kind of handle this topic without bringing it up, but it is important. We need to bring up the X card. Would anyone like to define what that is?
Cricket. All right, old rickety man, tell us what this X card is.
Take your fist at the cloud, sir.
All right.
Get off my lawn.
You whippersnappers. A lot of modern RPGs, I will call it Dishonored for specifically calling it out in one of the first pages of their rulebook. Not as a negative, but as a positive. A lot of modern RPGs will introduce what's called an X card. It's literally a card you put on a table, has large X on it. A player in a scene will point to that card, or before you start playing, and say, hey, that's a topic I'm not comfortable with.
Oh, that is a good one.
I am not against this concept. Not at all. However, I'm from a time where like that discussion happened like during character creation or right before it. There is nothing wrong with an X card. There's nothing wrong with this concept. Whether you have a card or whether you're willing to be like, hey, Zach, I need to leave the table, or let's please end this scene because I'm not comfortable with it. Another example would be the Call of Cthulhu book, Berlin, the Wicked City. I preface that book like, you have to be okay with some of the topics we're going to be covering, which includes people of multiple genders, people experimenting with sex and drugs, and the rise of the Nazi Party, which are not comfortable topics. And I fully admit that.
Yeah. Yeah, you do have to be very upfront with it. As I've told you, I've playing the Deadlands Western system. And, I think it was 1884 when we're playing with, and in this alternate world, the Civil War has been going on for 20 years, so there's still the Confederacy, still the Union. We have a lot of interactions with Native Americans, and it's like some racist stuff's going to come up, some terrible shit's going to come up. There's a lot of adult themes here, and our GM, who's running it, was very upfront with us and every single player that joins the table about that. So, yeah, it is.
Well, I know what's on my X card, and it involves clowns. But I can kind of see that. The one scenario we were running, I think it just ended not too long ago. My character was African American, and as my character faced a decent amount of racism in the 1920s. Shocking. Not only from just the world in general, but some of my fellow players. And it was, kind of enlightening. you know that stuff happens, and it helps in growing, I think, as a person and a player. Like, hey, this is what you signed up for. Like, this is what you're getting yourself into. And I think being a game master, you need to enlighten your players. Like, hey, this is very possibly what could happen.
I want to call out Lindsay for being an expert in the field of X cards and running her character in a correct manner where she'll let me know if there's an issue or not have it come up if it doesn't come up.
Yeah, I think it's really it's and Zach, you're great at checking in. I think, especially before we even start, you're like, hey, just letting you know, these things are in here, and I just want to make sure like you're cool with it, like. And you're just like, and if you ever have a problem, just stop me or let me know or step away. It's really important. I think it's really important to have those conversations. Even if you're just running a game for people and it's the first time you're running a game for this particular group, I think it's very important just to preface when you sit down, and let them know. I think it's a good habit to have. But yeah.
Yeah, and as an older player and an older game master, I'm not saying the X card doesn't exist. I'm just not used to it as a concept because I would have managed it before we even started.
Yeah,
I'm not saying
yeah.
it needs to go away. I'm saying that I understand why it exists.
Yeah, and you're saying you're not you're glad that it exists. But for you just, I feel like you handle the X card just in a different way. I mean, you cover it before it starts, and you always make sure that everyone knows what they can do if they need to, if it's something they can't particularly handle, or it's a topic that just needs, you just handle it in a different way. It's not a physically pointing to a card, or it's just handled differently.
It seems pretty implied, honestly. I think Zach has a good emotional intelligence about him and his players, to know what he can and can't do. Not that I can see the inner workings of his brain, but I know I haven't been in a situation that's been, uncomfortable. Nothing that's like coming to my memory. So thanks, Zach. You're awesome.
I'd say the big X card for me is anything like super sexual in nature. I'm like, your character is hugging or kissing, that's fine. But I'm not going to be at the table whenever you're reenacting your erotic fan fictions or whatever.
Rolling
For me,
constitution checks.
like, for me, okay, your character goes to a brothel, he plays for a lady, they chit chat or whatever, cut to black. I'm not gonna sit there while you RP out, whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
At most, I might make you roll a con roll to like resist like herpes, but that's all I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
I need your STD roll. Thank you.
Because I think, Zach, you had a certain situation where you were like, oh, I didn't think I needed to say, no, don't do this whenever you stepped away from the table. But then you get back to the table and it's like, oh my God.
And to be fair, Pat, like I was 4 feet from that table getting a beer out of my fridge, and I wasn't expecting to come back like, hey, I really don't need you animating oral sex on another character. It wasn't really prompted. And just know.
Yeah, and that stuff, you discuss, and it's a good thing to discuss beforehand. Any of that needs to be discussed, or, at least, letting players know this is the deal. This is how, we'll deal with, just let me know these things are here. They could come up, and if they do, or if something comes up and you didn't know that that's something that would make you so uncomfortable, this is what you can do.
Just like personally, there is a Delta Green campaign called Iconoclast, which is set in the Iraq, Afghanistan area concerning the Islamic State. I'm like, hey guys, while this is interesting, I'm not comfortable running this. I might not be comfortable running this for maybe the next 20 years or so. So I'm just not going to buy this book. So don't expect me to run it.
Yeah. Well, I remember you were talking about running the Berlin.
And
you
the fact I needed adults.
Yeah, you texted me and let me know. You're like, so this is what's in it, and just so you know. So, yeah.
All right. Well, old man Zach, am I go to get us back on track?
Get off my lawn.
Get off my Yeah, get back to we need to start like we've developed our group, we've planned our group, we need to start running. Like the first you're a brand new game master.
All right, so as a game master, your next step is module or homebrew. Which one do you run, and what are the benefits and the negatives of each? Zach, would you like to talk about maybe some of the pros and cons of module?
So some of the pros and cons, whether it be a one-shot or a whole adventure, is your time. Some people have more time to divest in their role-playing time. Guess what? As a game master, you do have to put in hours, whether that be a couple of hours before the game starts or 8 or 9. I can say, as someone who put in 45 hours into Rime of the Frost Maiden and never ran it, there is some time invested in there. The advantage to most modules is, hey, you have a framework to work on, whether you run that whole thing or you just steal some stuff from it. The work is already done. You're saving yourself 8 or 9 hours of work.
Now, what are some big negatives to you for running modules, could you say?
If you're not comfortable in the system, you might feel hemmed in, like you have to run a certain check in a certain area where you don't feel comfortable doing it, but you also don't know that you're comfortable. Like you don't have the experience to say, like, I wouldn't ask for that check in that period. I might give the player that information for free or no roll. There's also the cost involved. I'm a big fan of, like, if you're going to run a system for the first time, like, look in the rulebook and see if there's a free adventure in the book or on their website first. But the negative of running modules is you kind of trapped within the module a little bit.
Yeah, I would say time saving is probably the biggest pro for me too as well. But for me, sometimes, like, there's a reason I have Audible instead of like actually sitting there and reading books. So when I have the module in front of me, it's almost daunting, like, oh, Jesus Christ, I got to read this thing front to back, which not necessarily you don't have to, but if it's something that really entices you, I would recommend it to you so you know the end of the story before you get there or the party gets there. And probably one of the other cons for me for the module is I feel a little bit constrained. Like, if something goes wrong, how do I wrap it back into the story for me? And Zach, I think, Zach, you're more of a module kind of guy.
That's more of a modern thing for me. I used to be a lot of homebrew. Part of the advantage of running modules is learning through other people who wrote the module how to run checks. And then once you learn that, you can learn where you can kind of break things and fix things for you. It's not perfect, but it's, once again, guess what? Here's a secret. Every game master still has training wheels on. It's just how well they use those training wheels.
Oh, and another pro of a module is you're more likely to have a well-written story than a homebrew. Like, we're not all authors. Or playwright laureates or whatever. Usually for us people that are homebrewing, we're usually borrowing from movies and stories that are already out there and just twisting it a little bit. So the module, say if it's a Chaosism, am I saying the company name right, Zach?
So Chaosism, yep.
Yeah, so if you're running one of their modules, typically it's very well written. There's narrative hooks. There's interesting evil characters and subplots. Whereas, if we're just fumbling around in a homebrew, we might not necessarily get there.
I have a question about, like, modules and versus homebrew. Because my guess is there's a fair amount of like intuition as far as okay, this is where it would have to go. Just because the one, well, we run in Two-Headed Serpent. I know, in North Borneo we buried a major plot point, which was a nuclear weapon in a mountain, and this is, I guess, more of a question for Zach. Like, if you were running that, what would you have done, like, moving forward? Because my guess is you would have known, like, at least vaguely, like, how that chapter would have ended. Like,
So, Brian, as a
yeah, what would you
player
have
in
done?
that said game, I also knew what the device we buried was. So that's
Mhm.
kind of like a reverse spoiler. In terms of
Oh,
what happened, the same thing would still happen. Like
Yeah,
it doesn't change the power of the device.
oh.
yeah. As
Well,
the person GM, Brian, the same thing was going to happen, pretty much regardless whether it was buried in the mountain or y'all were toting it along.
My,
well,
You know,
my goal in that situation was not to reveal that to the other players who may not know that, because that is up to Pat to determine whether they should have that information or not. I
well,
might have seen behind the curtain. It is not my job to like spout that out.
now I want to know what that thing did.
Have you played Halo 3?
I think so.
Okay, well, just imagine, opening a door to a star.
Cool. Great.
the have to bring these.
And we're just like,
Oh,
we're gonna
okay.
bury it in a mountain.
Yeah,
So,
It'll be
let's start
fine.
on it. Pretty dirty dir.
right, well,
We're just gonna dig a hole. Jeez.
But the biggest thing about like modules is like if you don't know how to run a game, like that's what modules are there for. They are your little training areas. Like introduce this NPC. Here's some ideas like of their attitude, their disposition. Maybe you're not used to acting or have never acted before. Here's how you should maybe portray this character. Here's some foibles. Maybe it's a speech pattern. Maybe it's information they provide. Here's some examples of how checks are set. Because you might know a lot of the rules, but you don't know how they interact until you actually start messing around with them.
And maybe that's something I need to think about next time I play with a module, because Two-Headed Serpent was probably the first module, or maybe the second module I ever messed with. I see Zach with them all the time, and he got it for me as a gift. I'm like, well, I can't not run it. But the fact that you don't have to use every single piece, because there was characters and chapters that none of the players even interacted with that had a short little story with them, and hey, we didn't talk to them, we didn't get to find out about that character, so what? We moved on. So, and that was something whenever I was reading the chapters, I'm like, oh god, I got to remember all this. Not necessarily.
No, you need the 5-minute summary.
Yeah, summary of the chapter, and you're good to go. All right, so homebrews, pros and cons. Something I can say is a pro about the homebrew is it is very liberating. If people go off the rails as they are wont to do in your games, you know what's going to be happening in your world, so you can either make a new track for them to go on something completely different, or you can easily navigate them back into what they need to be doing, I find. A big con for me for homebrews is you can put in a whole lot of work. You can be doing world building, making all these characters, all these different things, all these cool interactions. You're like, oh my god, this would be neat if they did this. And they never touch that, and it's hours of your work just out the window. What about for you, Zach, for pros and cons on homebrew?
The biggest like strength of homebrew is the freedom. And don't be afraid to borrow anything. And I do mean borrow, don't steal. The 4th edition campaign I ran was literally a combination of Mega Man X and Castlevania 2 set in 4th edition. I just rethemed it and changed a couple things. My players never knew that. There was like one like Resident Evil joke in the middle somewhere. Resident Evil 4 specifically.
Yeah, one of my homebrews, I stole from The Hangover because at that point in time, I was tired of the oh, you're at an inn and that's where it all starts, and oh, there's a guild contract on the corkboard. At that time, I was just like, fuck that. Y'all are all waking up in a cornfield. They all each had little clues of what had happened to them the night before, but they all had amnesia. About like how they got there, and then it starts where the farmer's got his pitchfork on the porch yelling, "Hey, where's my daughter?" And that's how the adventure began.
Awesome.
Yeah, but it devolved into very comedy, not super serious, and I find that with my homebrews they always devolve into just comedy, and I can't help that. I don't know why. It's just where we go with it.
I mean, Pat, do you recall a invasion of coffee tables in one of the first Call of Cthulhu things I ran for you?
Yes, and I appreciated it. Um, and then further on in this Hangover-esque D&D campaign I was running, they were backtracking events and seeing their future selves solve puzzles for their past selves. So then I started messing with like fucked up timelines, and then I just screwed the pooch on that campaign. So that's one thing I can say about homebrews is it's pretty easy to get off track or get lost in what you're doing and not have kind of a cohesive story. It just ends up being a lot of random shit. Now, Brian and Lindsay, do you all know how many homebrews versus how many modules y'all have like been involved with?
Actually, when I started playing, it was all homebrew. We were just learning and figuring out as we went. I know my friend Sam and I even co-GM'd together the first little one shot. It ended up going 2 different sessions, and that was just completely the whole scenario was it was a little railroady because we just wanted to learn how to play. But yeah, I mean, initially it was just mostly homebrew, but now with you guys, it's mostly been module. So,
I honestly couldn't say how many. I think it's probably been more module, but I do feel like we've done a few homebrewy type things.
Well, Brian, that's on me because I always add either a vignette or a scenario or a whole section that's all mine.
yeah.
I would call out the airship when we did 5th edition. The crashing of the airship was all me. That haunted house that you and Pat and a lot of people went into that was really messed up, that was all me.
Those objects in oh gosh, the module name, it just went out of my head.
Oh, all of the Gaunt stuff in Children of Fear was all me.
of that. All of that was you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think, blending the two together is really cool. And that kind of lends to just knowing what you're doing. And I really think it adds a lot to the gameplay because I could go on Spotify or wherever and, find somebody playing and recording the game that we're going through and kind of, have spoilers and know what's going on. But if it's, the way Zach does it, it's like, oh, okay, well, yes, these are the general guides. It seems like you go through, these are the general guides, but I'm throwing in a bunch of curveballs, and I appreciate that as somebody who likes to know what's going on.
Well, as a call out to Ian, I don't know if you guys realize we're playing 4 or 5 Call of Cthulhu modules at the same time. I don't know if you guys knew that.
I did not. Damn, Ian.
He's adapted and adjusted a whole bunch of them, but I could call out every single one of them if I had to.
Wow.
I had a feeling because he had mentioned multiple H.P. Lovecraft stories. So that's why my guess was, oh wow, this is like, oh, there's a lot of stuff going on.
But
Which
this is also Ian's first like really big Call of Cthulhu campaign, and I have nothing against him doing that.
It's been very fun.
He's killing it.
He's getting the Forged in Fire treatment for Call of Cthulhu.
And I will have to say, I think it's only Pat in at least this, like in terms of the podcast, as the only player that's run through my island adventure. I have a internal module I run when I'm trying out a new system on an island, and it's like the same thing happens every time, but I'm trying out a new system, so I'm seeing like what the system can handle and what it can't. Because as a game master, you need to know that. You need to know where the boundaries are, because some systems can do stuff and some systems can't.
Yeah, and he's used this system in like high tech kind of sci-fi setting, because I remember in that I was Woos Brillis, the Fifth Element. Woos Brillis, and but then he's run it another time when we were in Warhammer Fantasy, and I was a rich nobleman's son, which I then went on to play. So yeah, having a little mock-up to run in a new system is also a good way to get started.
Was his name Barrison Lord?
No, it was Felix Jaeger.
Okay.
Zach knows the character.
He will live on.
Yeah. he got the cart and the shit, and he said, "Fuck all y'all, I'm out of this shithole town." So we talked about the pros and cons of homebrew and modules, and just find out what you're comfortable with. In my beginnings was homebrews, just testing the water, testing the system, getting goofy with it. But now that I've gotten older, I think I might appreciate modules a little bit more. But now it takes us to our next topic.
So the biggest thing, modules or not, regardless of anything else, your job as a game master is you set the stage, you pull up the curtain, and the players do stuff. They are not riding down the railroad track unless you really need them to. Like, that is a last resort.
And speaking of the railroad, since we're talking about the railroad, if you don't know what this is, it means the set storyline that the players have to go on, in essence, to carry on the plot of the story. But it's one of those finesse things that kind of like, I think they said at Disney World rides, you don't want them to know that they are on the rails. You want to blind them with all the magic of what's around them.
It's an experience versus no, you're on a track.
But the second they see the track, everything loses its magic. So, we'll always be on rails, but you don't want them to see the rails ever, because you want everybody to drive the story themselves. As the GM, you're not the story driver; you're just the conductor of the train.
And sometimes I feel like you have to lay new track to get back to. Sometimes,
Yeah.
And just gotta finagle.
And if you don't like the train conductor example, you are the lead person. You're the ringmaster of the circus. But guess what? You just introduce everyone else. You introduce the main characters, your players. And occasionally an NPC might come out and they might be a star for a little bit. But guess what? The players are still the superstars. They're your top billing. Don't forget that.
All right. So once you've settled on, the story narrative that you're going with, now we get to the tabletop. Physical representation or theater of the mind? What are the pros and cons there? Somebody want to take over for theater of the mind, pros and cons?
I personally love theater of the mind. You can be descriptive, you can be open, you are not bound to squares and hexes. But if Lindsay or Brian want to follow up on that, that's fine with me.
No, I was going to say the same thing. As somebody with a overactive imagination, I enjoy theater of the mind. I'm sure there's some merit to having something drawn out, and I think when we did the Temple of Elemental Evil, we did have a little bit of a map, and that definitely helped. But when we would go into a room, you would describe it, and my brain would create the actual scene. So I definitely appreciate theater of the mind, but again, little more on the creative side myself. So
Personally, I both work for me. Theater, but I feel like, especially whatever system you're playing, I think that can influence it as well. Like for Call of Cthulhu, I feel like that's theater of the mind up and down. I feel like it benefits from that.
And that's a good point. Like in Call of Cthulhu, like if you roll spot hidden, you're not like, I roll spot hidden at this specific bed. Like, no, you just roll spot hidden. And I'll tell you
And it's there.
if there's
Yeah,
something in the room. Not like,
yeah.
No, it's specifically right there in square 45.
And it's not, if you happen to find yourself in any kind of combat in Call of Cthulhu, it's not like, it's not like, well, you have to be, 5 feet away for this, and then you have to be, it's not as, if that makes any sense.
Well,
It's
also,
not as.
Also, if you're in combat in Call of Cthulhu, mistakes were made.
Mistakes were made, exactly. You're not with Call of Cthulhu. If you're shooting a gun and you're taking your time to keep shooting something, you've made the wrong choice. You have to. You should be running. So I feel like, depending on the system, but honestly, both are fine with me. I fucks with both of them, but I just think that some systems lend themselves better to some.
Yeah, Lindsay, I couldn't have said it better than you. Like, you took the words right out of my mouth. But I would, investigation systems, RP heavy systems, theater of the mind is where it's at. And I'd say combat heavy ones is where table representation helps, where like, I like position myself between the wizard and this, hobgoblin as the fighter.
Like especially like in D&D where like you're a spellcaster, this spell like affects 5 foot squares. Like, okay, then you need to know that.
Yeah, and visually see where those dudes are at. Something we haven't mentioned about, probably one of the best perks for Theater of the Mind, is the cost. It costs nothing. Versus probably one of the biggest negatives to physical representation is the cost. Now you can use chess pieces or pennies and coins. You could use
candy. Like if you kill the candy, you get to eat the candy. That's a cool.
That's great.
Yeah,
we used Monopoly pieces. We played initially, and things like that. Like
But you can get as crazy as your wallet wants you to be as far as physical representation. You can go out and get a resin 3D printer and print up all the models for everything so everybody can see it. And you could, get a plywood table and put hills and model compound and fake rocks and put some fluff out for.
I also think there's a hidden trap in theater. Sorry, not theater of the mind. Physical representation. Depending on the encounter, you also like reach a point where you can't do that. I'm going to call out the level 100 second edition campaign where you have a 10,000 zombie encounter. Like, no, theater of the mind. That don't even bother. Put the characters in the center of the map. Don't even bother anything else.
Yeah, no, that's
that's like when one of your grandparents reaches like 90, and you're not putting 90 birthday candles. You're putting 9, and each one is 10.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or my dad's 70, so we just got like 2 candles, a 7 and a 0. Like we have all the other numbers now. We're fine.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that works too.
Now, another pro for Theater of the Mind to me is not only do you have all this cool shit to look at, which, if we're talking like board games, you can ask Zach. I'm a sucker for like cool minis or engaging boards. Like, oh, look at that. Like, we're playing Shadows over Camelot. It's like, oh, we're in the castle. No, there's the fields and the beaches and the guys fighting on it. I'm a sucker for all that shit. But somebody that is new into a role play system, I'd say physical representation is easier for them to grasp because, they can look down and see, oh, that's the saloon over there. Oh, there's the outhouse. There's the gallows over here. It's easier for somebody to grasp that is new to role playing.
I think one of the advantages of theater of the mind in that same regard, in terms of difference, is letting the players know like the hard limitations, and sometimes that's harder to like represent. Like that's what your descriptive terms are. Okay, I'm gonna go like attack the Shoggoth. What happens? You're utterly destroyed. Don't even bother rolling a new character.
Yep, you're done.
Oh, and I guess a con for physical representation is I think I find that it slows down the games.
Yes.
It does.
Moving the pieces, getting them out, cleaning them up at the end. It's a whole thing.
Also, compared to like D&D, and this is not D&D's fault, this is like just combat-focused RPGs, is they already take a long time, and sometimes the physical map makes them take even longer.
I do remember you playing D&D, and you're running it, and you just use die. Like, oh, there's 6 kobolds in this room, and you would like put them out as to like general area as just on the table, and that was helpful. Knowing that spellcasters and whatnot have so much room, or seeing like how they would move during combat, or like where that was useful because that is a little bit harder to track in my mind personally. But
also, Brian, like if I have to like pull out the full battle map and draw it, it is a very specific reason it has happened.
Yeah,
and it is not just combat. Like there's a cooler spell happening or some other big effect. I'm sorry, I'm lazy. Like I fully admit it, I'm lazy. But most of us are young adults. We work 40 hours plus a week. That is a lot of effort versus like just do the thing.
You say lazy, I say efficient.
I mean, I will call it specifically in Warhammer Fantasy. Pat was there. Oh, there's a whole cave versus goblins. Like you guys are not a high level because there's no levels in Warhammer Fantasy. Like goblins pose next to no threat of you. They're just going to drain like a little bit of HP and time. I could finish this entire section of this book tonight, or I can run these 2 combats. I'm going to work on finishing the section of the book.
That makes sense.
Logical.
But,
yeah.
As far as, or go ahead.
To also call myself out, I definitely use a certain ghost card to force all my players back on track because I had built a haunted house. I'm like, hey guys, I designed this haunted house. I don't want this session to go 3 sessions. The ghost car is taking you to the haunted house. You are finishing the haunted house tonight.
We did finish that.
In theory, I should have let you guys take your time like that. Like I should have actually done that. That is on me. But like, no, guys, I have other stuff to do. I want you to finish this tonight.
In fairness, we weren't doing anything. We were avoiding the haunted house.
Yeah.
Like, no doubt, we were.
No, Lizzie, it was like messed up house. The messed up house. It like makes Arkham Asylum look like a vacation destination.
Ooh.
It was terrible. Outside was terrible. Inside was like it was
like I will go spend a 3-day weekend on Alcatraz before I stay in that house.
Cool.
Yeah, the pig man that was definitely
wanging about.
That corn.
Wanging about.
Yeah, Yeah, or the corpse with a bunch of, holes in it.
It's all right. It's all good. I'm good.
Yeah, that was
The body that like, each day had missing portions.
Yeah, I did almost make a very gross decision at one point because we're looking for a specific lady, like girl, and we opened a room to like a theater. And there's two headless people, one, it's a male and a female. And I was like, well, how are we going to know what color her hair is? We knew what color the person's hair was we were looking for. and, orating my thoughts quietly to myself. Luckily, Zach was sitting right next to me. He's like, just check the wallet. I was like, that's way better.
That's better. It's a
Way
lot better.
Right, exactly. Because you know where my brain was going. Like, well.
To be fair, if I was in full like 1920s mode, like it would write the hair color, but like it wouldn't show it. But that was still the better choice. Like
better choice.
You know that, right?
Yeah. Oh no. I like.
Way better choice.
Also, we were playing in public, and like we were already like moving into X. So like, hey guys, let's like put this back into PG-13.
Yeah, my bad.
Let's backpedal a little bit.
Because like the whole section, like we're already in R, and I mean like hard R. Let's move that car back a little bit.
Yeah,
exactly. Ghost car brought us there, man. We were just living it.
Exactly. It's the ghost car's fault.
This is the ghost cards world. We're just living in it.
Yeah,
but well, I could also call it an actual train where someone activated a robot.
Yeah.
Not me. I did not activate robot.
Hey, Lindsay, you're playing Call of Cthulhu. There's a broken down robot. I'm gonna repair it. What's the worst that can happen?
Nope.
By the way, that robot looks like Doctor Doom.
No, you you put dynamite in its mouth and you blow it up.
Just don't fuck with it because it has like a fire saber and other terrible things.
No, you burn that shit out and you walk away.
Now, Lindsay, just imagine like a Harry Potter Sneetch, but it is covered with razor wire.
No.
And attacks you.
No. No, thank you. Pass. I would like to pass.
Or everyone going to the castle. Everyone going to the castle. I'm going to pass my spot hidden roll. That was a mistake.
Yeah, the game didn't last too much longer. We got back. I got spells, and 5 minutes later, the game was over.
Man, that goblet of wine was really coppery. I know. Why was it really coppery? Oh, reasons. What kind of reasons? Vampiric
reasons.
Life-sustaining reasons.
But
anemic reasons.
To close out our thoughts on physical representation or theater of the mind, basically pick what option's best for you. And if you do choose the route of physical representation, I'd recommend starting small, with cheap things, see if it is the thing for you and your group. And if it's not...
Excuse me, Pat. Pat, I have to call you out. Legos is the greatest trick you've ever showed me.
Dude, I got the collection built. Like one day we will be playing with Lego minifigs.
Yes.
And I have a Star Wars RPG lined up with Lego minifigs, and I have a Call of Cthulhu minifigs that you've seen there, Zach. We're getting there.
The other thing is always ask for feedback. No one wants to hear you're Dave, the greatest role player RPG game master ever. No. Everyone can improve. That is like my longest standing thing as a human. You can never improve. You should just die then.
Now, Zach, would you have any RPing recommendations as a game master, for playing your different characters?
This is probably my weakest point, but I will at least attempt to try. Summon the character in your mind, like become that character. There's a specific character that I use the most, I call it my salesman guy.
Yeah.
He's the Pogo Go-Go guy. He's based on basically Boomy from Avatar. You do the thing, Pogo Go-Go. It's the Pogo Go-Go. You go faster, Pogo Go-Go.
Yeah,
Just
I've met him.
summon the character in your mind. Jimmy Bones is probably my second most used character. We're like, what's Jimmy Bones' attitude? Death. Like avarice and death. Like, don't mess with Jimmy Bones. But I love Pogo Go-Go. It's the Pogo Go-Go. What's it do? It makes you go-go. What? Go faster.
Yeah. And as we, as you GM more, you'll have your go-to voices that are in your little toolbox of voices. I found out that for, I guess, a natural progression for role-playing different NPCs and stuff in your games, I feel like an old person voice is always something that everybody has in their back pocket. Even since we were little kids, everybody's pretended to be an old man.
I'll help you out.
How do, neighbor? What can I do for you?
Or
Everybody-
whatever that old colonel that was hitting on Lindsay's character's math. My mustache will come for you.
And Brian and Lindsay, do y'all feel like you would have y'all have old person voices somewhere deep in you?
Deep in there.
Deep in there.
Deep
We're on the
in there.
surface.
I have an old person voice deep inside.
Oh,
Get off my lawn!
Could you speak up there, you young whippersnapper? It's hard to hear you. Mine's Southern.
You're
I love
a
it.
Southern belle.
I would also say that me and Pat, this is the area of RPG-ness that we need to improve.
Yeah. And I have been, as a player, been working towards it.
I do have I have a addition that would make Jimmy Bones that much better. Is if he constantly sucked his teeth when he was talking. Just because I think of Jimmy Bones as semi pimp, right? And I just think of just sucking his teeth all the time. I don't know why.
Gotta get some teeth sucking in there, Zach.
I think of Kingpin from Spider-Man. I don't know why.
Damn.
Oh, okay. That's See, I have a very small, slender man in my mind for Jimmy Bones.
So
that would make sense.
Brian is more correct in terms of his stature. He's 5'7".
Yeah, he's a little guy. Yeah, he's I assume he has a gold tooth and wears a pimp hat.
But he's the kind of guy where if his shadow falls on you, it's man, I have something to do and Timbuktu right now.
But for GMing, like I said, an old voice is usually an easy one to start out with. Then I've had plenty of goblins I've had to role play. How do you do, boss? What can we do for you? Just that high pitch, squeaky kind of something. And then maybe
What are you selling?
oh yeah, that's that scumdog voice
From Resident Evil 4, yeah.
Yeah. And let's see, a proud nobleman is, that's just
haughty.
a very honorable voice,
That's not an authentic kangaroo rug.
Exactly. But the biggest thing with role playing your characters for people is, it's kind of multifold. You got to be okay with it, jump out there. It's something that gets people more hooked into the game, even if you feel silly doing it. And
you have to lose some personal shame. Also, in any scene, role play what that character wants and what that character hates. What bar they won't bend.
Yeah.
I will definitely lean on Lindsay and Brian on those two because it's something that I need to work on personally.
There's a lot of trust that happens at the table, and sometimes it's hard to let go and to just, like I said, feel silly. Like you said, feel silly. You just have to remind yourself, and I have to remind myself too, that everyone's here to play the game. And, everyone's here sitting at this table. They have a million other things they could be doing right now, but they're here and they want to play this game. And so let's play the game. And so I have to remind myself sometimes and just be like, everyone's here to play. And so when you're playing together, there is a certain level of trust playing these games, that there's something going on at the table that's very unique to this type of game. Is that there's a lot of trust that has to go on there. But that's something that I remind myself all the time, is that we're here having fun and everyone is here to do the same thing. So it's tough.
I need to give you a big old Bob Ross throw and a hug. That was like perfect.
But I think that's probably the hardest part of role playing, is letting go. It's very difficult to do if you've never experienced it before. But the thing is, another thing you have to remind yourself is that it's just like anything else. The more you do it, the better you're going to get. You're practicing. You didn't just pick up stuff you didn't pick up a guitar and you could just play it. You have to practice, unless you're, a savant, which is rare. But you know what I mean? Like, it's just like any other skill. You're learning as you go. And so try not to be super hard on yourself. It's a learning. You're learning. You have to practice, and the only way to do that is to do it. And so, try not to be super hard on yourself all the time. I know that's easy to say, harder to do. Yeah, it's a skill.
I find it pretty infectious. Like, if somebody starts doing voices for their characters at the table, it incentivizes me to do it as well. So anytime I'm playing a RPG with like Ian or Lindsay, who I believe are our stronger role players, I'm stoked because I know they're gonna try and do a voice or something unique for their characters, which inspires me to do the same with mine. So if you are the GM, we know that there's a lot that already rests upon your shoulders as being the GM, but you're also, the conductor of the funness of the session. So just shed off that shame and just give it a go.
So, like, if you can boil down a character to core characteristics, I'm gonna call out my cowboy character that me and Lindsay worked with in Cat's.
I love him.
Two-headed serpent. It's like, what's his characteristic? He's a bastard-coated bastard with bastard flakes.
Yep.
What's he gonna do?
Yep.
Be a bastard.
Mm-hmm. He's real good at it.
Oh, and guys, I think I've tapped into my RPN in this little Western campaign, because I am just like redneck hillbilly as shit.
Sweet.
Because, and I was just like, oh my god. Like the
oh my god.
the first scene, there was a guy being hung out at the gallows in town, and apparently everybody in town, came around to watch it, because what else are you going to do in the West anyways? That's like as good as TV. But my guy was in an outhouse watching the hanging through like the little moon cut in the door, and shit went down. So I kick open the door because I'm like,
now did it go down in two different locations?
Yes, it did.
Oh.
Shit was going down, and then.
But I'm playing this like fat prospector dude. I had my long johns on and some overalls, and I'm fighting to get my pants on while kicking down that door and pulling up my shotgun. I'm like, what is going on out here? And everyone's just like lost their shit and like, yes, that's a good character introduction.
I can recall Brian borrowing money from me and then only paying back some of it. I'm like, Brian, you were so lucky my character didn't know you didn't give back the full rebate on that, because you'd be fucking dead.
Sick.
Yeah. I did not realize the depth of your bastard.
That was before I almost hung that guy out the window. Like, hey, can we have this map? What do you mean? Well, you're not using it. Like, what do you mean? It's like I locked this door. Like, I'm getting this fucking map. I don't think you realize that.
Yeah, when you lock the door with us in, are you talking about when you lock the door with
the survey engineer?
Oh yeah.
Like, we have this map. Show her this map. Like, okay, it looks like this. Like, I'm gonna lock the door. It's like, we're gonna get this map. Why are we getting this map? Because I fucking want it. Why else? Like, I don't think you realize we're getting this fucking map. Like, I don't care. Like, That's my current
You're like, I
objective.
turn around and I lock the door, and I was like, oh shit.
Or like
Here we
even
go.
before we got in there, like, oh, there's a whole bunch of like crowd of locals, like natives, like before the gates, like protesting or whatever. It's like I'm just gonna like take my shotgun and fire it in the air, and if they don't like part, well, we're gonna have problems. We're gonna have a lot of dead people.
Oh, Jesus.
Actually, you bringing up that whole story, Zach, kind of made me realize something else. That not all RP has to be vocalized as well, because Zach's character was this old, gruff, cowboy. But Zach was always taking a long drag off a cigarette before he did something memorable or noteworthy. So Zach, the player, would, pretend to light and take a draw off an imaginary cigarette and like flick it off and then do a thing. So it doesn't always have to be a voice. You can just literally act it out yourself too.
And that's yeah, and that's a good point too. Even mannerisms, yes, absolutely. And also sometimes even self-narration just for a second, if like you're in a situation of like your character doesn't say anything, but you can say what your character is doing. Or even if you find yourself, and sometimes I've done this where if I'm in, if I'm in a moment with someone else and we're having a conversation and I'm not exactly sure how to respond, I'll take a moment and I'll narrate something. I'll be like, "Oh, I take a sip from my teacup or whatever," and then kind of try to formulate what I'm going to say or what she would say back.
Also on that, don't be afraid of props. Sean, a player in a different game, literally has a fez and he's playing an Egyptian man. And RC just picked up a top hat and he's a magician. Bonus points on all of that.
Anything that if it helps you and it makes you feel more in it, then absolutely. I want to see it.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be full cosplay. It could be just a hat, or I'm looking around for a corncob pipe for my prospector. Like just a little prop or something can just take it that little extra bit.
Pat, I want, once you've developed this voice more, I want some authentic frontier gibberish.
Oh, you got it. You got it. Well, there was a little boy running out of the woods that was all torn up and whatnot. And I'm trying to use like a lot of, I want to say that they're called euphemisms, but I'm not sure if that's the proper word for it. Colloquialisms. Where, like he came out and I'm like, "Boy, what you doing running out of there like a bat out of hell? What's your problem?" And like, I don't know. I'm in this Western character now. He's my new persona.
Also,
I'm not gonna lie, you sounded like 90% like my brother-in-law from Virginia.
Oh boy.
Also, to call out Ian, he's perfect for like miming a prop. Like when he had his cane and he's like moving papers on the desk or banging it on the desk. He didn't have a cane in his hand, but he was at least miming it.
But him miming it just brought it to life so much more because you could just visualize it because how he's pretending to pat down the table.
Yep.
Bang, bang, bang. Or like moving the papers with like a swish of his cane.
Yeah, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of mannerisms. Don't be afraid of anything like that.
So, gang, do we have any closing remarks for an aspiring GM?
I have a couple, not many. Always ask and take feedback. Don't expect you're Dave, the greatest RPG ever, like role player ever, or game master ever. Always take feedback. Like Matt Mercer is a great game master. No one can deny this, but guess what? You are you and not Matt Mercer. You need to be you. Don't be Matt Mercer, be you. And it's hard to hear that because he's great.
And he would be the first to tell you to be you. Yeah.
And then the other most important thing is 1, have fun, and 2, schedule your next session. Because if you don't, your game dies. Hence our conversation about getting that date set. We're gonna meet every day on this date at this time, unless something happens. If you don't do that every week, your game dies. Why does that suck as a player? You don't have a game to play. Why does it suck as a game master? You don't have players to run. And that's not something you can hand off. I can't be like, yo, Lindsay, make sure everyone's good next week. Like, Lindsay has to do Lindsay things. So Lindsay's focused on Lindsay.
See things.
Okay, Zach, I'll do it, but I've got to light people on fire with my brain.
With my mind powers.
My big things would basically be communication, be transparent, and just as Zach said it earlier, and we could reiterate it till we're blue in the face. You're there to have fun. You're not there to be the coolest or to fight somebody. You're there to enjoy your time off. And as soon as it becomes not fun, maybe look inwardly and just be like, what am I doing wrong, or what are we doing wrong? How can we fix this?
And Pat, you just said the number one thing: communicate.
Yeah, communicate.
Hey, Greg, don't do that again. Or hey, I want my character to have the option to do this or do this. Well, is it you communicating that to the game master, or is that you not communicating that through your character? Sometimes it's hard to determine, but you need to start communicating either way.
Yeah. And often, I think I've had it before where, say, something comes up where it's a big no-no, and you're the game master at the time, so, you can dictate, like, hey, we aren't doing that. If you let it happen, and then you carry on, you've missed your opportunity to stop it carrying on going forward.
No, that is definitely like, hey, that happened the one time. No, it's not happening again. It's the same thing with rules calls. Like, hey, we're going to rule it like this one time, and I will reevaluate and read the rule and come back to you.
And, being the game master, you're going to have to navigate some social situations that are often awkward or weird, and it's just the nature of the beast. You'll learn as you go. You can lean on other game masters for, hey, how do you handle this situation? And we're all a community, so you can reach out. You don't have to figure out how to do this by yourself.
Yeah, we didn't mention it earlier, but like if you have a GM mentor or another GM either in your party as a player or close to that area, don't be afraid to ask anything. Even if they're like younger as a DM than you or a GM than you, they might know more, or they might know something you don't.
Yeah, and give you different angles that you didn't even think about. And most of the time, if you're approaching somebody else that's a GM and you're letting them know, like, hey, I'm interested in doing this too, I'd say about 99% of the time they're going to help you out, because you know what that means? They have a chance to play with you as well. So, that's a major thing. And I guess for my very last thing, just take the leap. Rip that Band-Aid off. Do the thing. Don't be scared. It'll be all right.
It's scary. So scary.
Well, generally things that are scary lead to better things. So I'm for it.
Better things like Tucker fucking Carlson.
Yeah.
Yep. Now that has been, so that's my I would say as my aspiring GM this to not push but gently nudge your players to play characters that are maybe outside their wheelhouse, because
I 100% agree. Like, I'm going to play so like, be the scummiest scum that you ever scummed before. What does that mean? Well, you've hit rock bottom. Now you can work your way up. You can be that holier than thou because when you hit rock bottom.
Yep.
Yeah,
It is liberating playing someone who's just scummy.
Yeah, it's liberating playing somebody who's incredibly pompous, because that is just not in my general life wheelhouse, and it's entertaining to be able to roleplay it. So, yeah, thanks for that too.
I'm someone who can't even. I get stomach aches when I have to make, like, in those choice-based RPG video games, or you have to make like the mean choice. I always am like, oh, But like when I've been playing this most recent character I've been playing, who's an assassin, it's pretty liberating. It took me a minute to kind of get past that kind of.
So if it was a quick time event, pedestrian walking across road, safely escort them across, or hurl them into windshield and kill them to stop the speeding car. Oh, I'm picking that one right now.
With my mind powers, yeah. And everyone at the table's like, well, would she care? I'm like, no. Nope. She doesn't care. She's got to stop that car somehow.
To be, we tried to stop that car many times before that
Many
happened.
times. Okay, let me just preface. Yes, we tried many different methods to stop this car.
I recall steering wheel being manipulated and many
I
other
turned the
things.
steering wheel. You were like straight up just like trying to shoot people in the car. A mess. Tires. We were trying to shoot tires, I think. It was a nightmare. Anyway.
Yeah.
Pedestrian to windshield.
And through that, I know me as a player, I'm much more, I don't want to say scared, but apprehensive and just like aware of your character more now than like session 1 through 3. It's your character arc has been very good.
And that's the thing when you're playing characters. If you're a player, you start with a character and you have your rough outline, or however everybody's different with creating characters. But you sit down at the table and you actually play them, it usually is much different than you anticipate. And sometimes you have to kind of roll with it, and then you kind of find them. Sometimes it takes a few games before you find who they are.
Yep, calling back my bastard character, I still was willing to yo-yo myself out of an airplane to save the party.
Yep.
Or like you piloting that plane. Well, they're like in the windshield of the airplane. Shoot through the windshield. They're giant like bat monsters. What do you care?
Cool.
I think another thing to be aware of from the player perspective, like role-playing your character, is like, don't put yourself in your box. Put yourself in your GM's box. You might find those boundaries to be wider than you think they are. Because generally the GM's box is like, okay, what is an X card? That's my box. I will call it Ian being an expert about finding those boundaries.
He is very good at that.
100%. Was it Delta Green? Like he was this DEA agent, and he like as he was creating his character, it was just getting worse and worse.
Oh no, like everyone's like so and so's like, okay, let's dial this up to 11,000.
Yeah, I think this is the scummiest, most awful character anyone has played at this table.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think at one point he was trying to make a decision, and he like looked at me and he's just like, I'm not going to cross that particular line. I think it was with Luke's character. At that time,
it was between
underrated.
you and Luke's character. It's like, let's not be culturally racist right now.
Yes, that was it. I was like, you've crossed a lot of boundaries, which is like, I get it. Like, it's to me, this is freedom of expression for the most part. So, if you want to let your freak flag fly, go for it. At some point, though, I'm like, wow, it's a little. You're dancing on the line. You can jump over a little bit, but it was about to be a leap for a hot minute there.
Also, to call out the reverse of X cards, guess what? There are plenty of times where characters were gay. You never knew that. Unless you super found out. In Masks, there is literally a Nazi, because the Nazi party was around in 1930 and 25. But you know what? Unless you push that button, you're not going to find out. Because sometimes, like, that's life. You're not going to know everything about everybody.
Yeah, and especially like with Delta Green. I mean, my character was definitely not straight, but
Lindsay, I didn't want to call that earlier. I can call out several previous characters who are like, oh, was she not straight? It's like, technically she wasn't, but in terms of you figuring that out, you had to work real hard.
You were gonna have to, you were gonna have to work at it. Yeah.
And guess what? Given the time period, that's how it was. Whether that's fair or not, no. But we are simulating an experience, not forcing to live in that experience.
And with Delta Green, even that, because it started out in the 90s. So still, it wasn't something that was, and especially playing agents that we didn't even know really the first names. We all had code names. It was a very
I will call out Jackson Elias as being gay the entire time, and pretty much no one knew that.
Wow, cool. See.
Yep, you were eunuch. To be fair, you were a Catholic priest, so minus the little boys joke, it never came up.
Yeah, and that's something else I like. Role-playing wise, as a player, when you're role-playing, I mean, keep secrets. It's fun to, because in reality, you're not going to walk up and introduce yourself and then tell everyone your whole life story. Keep things in. It's fun that way.
Also, secrets are gas for you and the game master later. Like if you need to pour gas in a scene, that's where you get it. Yeah.
And it's so fun to sit at the table and be like, okay, we're trying to figure out who these people are. You're not giving much away, and it's getting those little pieces, and you're like, ooh, I'm gonna press that button later. Things, it's like you said, it's gas.
Yeah, the reverse window. Oh, Rob's a rich, famous white guy. He's gonna get into that famous club because they know he's a singer. That's like the opposite form of that said gas. Like it's still gonna happen. Like be aware that at any time your character has powers you're not aware of. Whether you be the hobiest hobo that ever hoboed, or you're Jeff Bezos. You have options that maybe a character at the table doesn't have. So I highly doubt someone made the same freaking character as you did. And also, if they did, your game master should have been like, okay, guys, work it out.
Alrighty, gang. Well, I think I speak for all of us here at Ask the GM's podcast that we hope you have a grand time GMing, potentially, or playing other games where someone else is GMing. And everyone have a good evening.
Yeah. I only want to call out June 29th, the new starter set for Pendragon comes out, so check that out. And everyone have a good evening. And thank you for joining Ask the GMs.